Heat. The crew in Heat runs the most disciplined armored car and bank jobs in movie history, and the whole thing comes apart over a single cup of coffee. Heat is the 1995 crime epic written and directed by Michael Mann, starring Robert De Niro as master thief Neil McCauley and Al Pacino as Detective Vincent Hanna. McCauley lives by one rule, and he says it out loud in the film. Never have anything in your life you can't walk out on in 30 seconds flat if you feel the heat around the corner. The job that finally breaks the crew is the downtown bank robbery, where they walk out with roughly $12.2 million and a clean exit. Then a getaway error and a tipped-off police presence turn an ordinary city street into a running gun battle that costs crew members their lives. McCauley still nearly makes it out, and then he breaks his own rule, detouring to kill the informant Waingro, which puts Hanna right back on him at the airport, where McCauley is gunned down on the runway. What most people don't know is that Mann based McCauley on a real career criminal of the same name, tracked by Chicago detective Chuck Adamson, and shot dead during an armored car job in 1964. That famous diner scene even comes from a real coffee meeting Adamson once had with the real McCauley. Heat is the gold standard for the professional crew whose plan is flawless on paper and undone by simple human weakness, the exact flaw that doomed the man it was based on. Reservoir Dogs. You never even see the heist in Reservoir Dogs, because the entire movie is about figuring out why a flawless diamond job turned into a bloodbath. Reservoir Dogs is Quentin Tarantino's 1992 directorial debut, starring Harvey Keitel, Tim Roth, Michael Madsen, and Steve Buscemi, as robbers who only know each other by color-coded aliases. The robbery itself is never shown on screen. The film opens after the diamond store job has already collapsed, with the survivors regrouping in an abandoned warehouse, trying to work out what went wrong. The immediate failure is Mr. Blonde, who panics and starts shooting, turning a quiet smash and grab into a massacre that kills cops and bystanders and brings the entire force down on them. But the deeper failure is a setup from the start. One of the crew, Mr. Orange, is an undercover cop who fed them to the police from the inside. What is wild is how much of this Tarantino borrowed. He drew heavily on Ringo Lam's 1987 Hong Kong film City on Fire, which features an undercover cop who bonds with the very gangster he is betraying during a jewelry heist. Lam himself said Tarantino took the last 10 minutes of his movie and built an entire film around it. That is what makes Reservoir Dogs so pure. The whole story is the autopsy of a perfect plan. The town. The Fenway Park job in The Town is the biggest score the crew ever attempts, and the FBI is already waiting inside the stadium before they even arrive. The Town is the 2010 crime thriller co-written, directed by, and starring Ben Affleck, his second film behind the camera after Gone Baby Gone. The plan that ends the crew is the heist on Fenway Park, robbing the cash room of the Boston Red Sox stadium during a game. The weak link turns out to be Krista. The FBI leans on her using her history of drug dealing, and she gives up what she knows about the Fenway job, so the agents are in position long before the robbery begins. The second the crew is spotted, the heist becomes a shootout. Dez is killed first, then Glonsey sacrifices himself, driving a stolen ambulance as a diversion so the others can run, and dies crashing it into a police vehicle. Doug manages to slip out of the stadium with the money, shakes Agent Frawley, and the film ends with him laying low in Florida. The Town is the modern blueprint for the plan undone from inside the crew, where every member is good at the job, but one pressured girlfriend is all it takes to put the police a step ahead. Dog Day Afternoon. This is the bank robbery where almost nothing went right, and the wildest part is that it actually happened. The 1975 film, directed by Sidney Lumet, starring Al Pacino as Sonny and John Cazale as Sal, is based on a real Brooklyn bank robbery. The real event took place on August 22, 1972, when John Wadowitz, Salvatore Natural, and a third man tried to rob a Chase Manhattan branch. The plan fell apart immediately, and on almost every front at once. The third robber lost his nerve and fled before a single dollar changed hands. Then came the worst surprise of all. An employee told them the vault held only about $1,100, when they had walked in expecting hundreds of thousands. A teller had already triggered the silent alarm, so the police arrived fast, and the botched robbery turned into a hostage standoff that dragged on for around 14 hours, drawing an enormous crowd and live television coverage that turned the robbers into accidental media figures, exactly the way the film dramatizes it. In the real ending, The two men were promised a flight out of the country and driven to the airport, where Natural was shot and killed, and Wadowitz surrendered on the spot. The reason behind all of it makes the story even more human, because Wadowitz robbed the bank to pay for his partner's gender confirmation surgery. This is the anti-heist, a plan so underprepared it collapsed in minutes, and yet it became one of the most human crime films ever made. By the way, if you're enjoying this so far, I post videos like this all the time, and a subscribe would genuinely help the channel out. Thanks. Rififi. This pulls off one of the most flawless jewelry jobs ever put on film, and then sits back and watches the thieves destroy themselves one by one. Rififi is the 1955 French crime film directed by Jules Dassin, famous for a roughly 30-minute heist sequence performed with no dialogue, no music, and almost no sound at all. The crew breaks into a jewelry store by boring down through the ceiling from the apartment above, then slides an upturned umbrella through the hole to catch the falling debris so it does not trip the pressure alarm below. The heist itself is a complete success. The plan that fails is everything after, as greed and ego quietly pull the crew apart. The thief Caesar keeps one ring from the haul and gives it to a singer, telling her it's fake when it's actually worth a fortune. A rival gangster named Grutter recognizes it and pieces together exactly who pulled the job. From there, it becomes a chain of kidnapping and killing, ending with a mortally wounded Tony racing a convertible back into Paris and dying at the wheel. Rififi invented the modern step-by-step heist scene that nearly every later film copies, and it set the rule the rest of this list keeps proving. The perfect job is never undone by the cops. It's undone by the men who pull it. Point Break. The ex-presidents in Point Break never get caught robbing banks, right up until the day their leader decides he wants more. Point Break is the 1991 action film directed by Catherine Bigelow, starring Keanu Reeves as FBI agent Johnny Utah and Patrick Swayze as Bodie. A gang of surfers robs banks wearing masks of former presidents, and their golden rule is a fast in and out that never, ever touches the vault. The plan breaks the moment Bodie gets greedy and goes for the vault on one job. It goes wrong, the crew member Gromit is killed, and Bodie starts to come apart at the seams. He forces Utah into one final robbery by taking his girlfriend hostage, and the whole thing ends with Utah letting Bodie paddle out to ride one last wave straight into a deadly storm. Point Break shows the perfect routine broken by the one thing every careful crew quietly fears: a leader who suddenly wants more than the plan was ever built to allow. The Asphalt Jungle. This wrote the rulebook for the heist movie, including the rule that every perfect plan is only as strong as the men running it. The Asphalt Jungle is the 1950 crime film directed by John Huston, based on the novel by W.R. Burnett, and it features an early screen appearance from Marilyn Monroe. A criminal mastermind named Doc Riedenschneider plans a major jewelry heist right after leaving prison, assembling a crew of specialists financed by a crooked lawyer called Emmerich. The robbery goes off almost exactly as designed, and that's the whole point. The plan doesn't fail at the safe, it fails afterward. During the getaway, the safecracker Lewis is accidentally shot, and that's the first crack in the operation. From there, the crew is undone entirely by their own weaknesses. A bookie turns informant after a beating. Emmerich is destroyed by his own greed, and Doc is finally caught only because he lingers a few minutes too long, watching a young girl dance to a jukebox. This is the original, and almost every entry on this list owes its structure to Huston's simple idea that the heist is easy, and the criminals themselves are the real problem. Le Cercle Rouge. This stages a flawless jewelry robbery in the heart of Paris, then quietly proves that no thief ever really escapes the circle. The Cercle Rouge is the 1970 French film directed by Jean-Pierre Melville, a classic of the genre, starring Alain Delon as the master thief Corey. A fresh-out-of-prison thief, an escaped convict, and an alcoholic ex-cop team up to rob an upscale jewelry shop on the Place Vendôme. The centerpiece is a roughly 30-minute heist sequence performed almost entirely without dialogue. The robbery succeeds, but the plan to walk away clean does not. A relentless inspector named Mattei keeps working the case, and the trio's own pasts close in around them until their fates are sealed. Melville's title says it all. The red circle is the idea that guilty men are fated to meet again, which means the perfect job only ever delays the reckoning. Widows. In Widows, 4 grieving women inherit their dead husband's final heist plan, and the biggest twist is that one husband was never actually dead at all. Widows is the 2018 thriller directed by Steve McQueen, co-written with Gillian Flynn, adapted from a 1980s British television miniseries, and starring Viola Davis. A crew of professional thieves is killed when their getaway van explodes during a shootout with police, leaving their widows deep in debt to a dangerous man. Veronica, the widow of crew leader Harry, recruits the other women to pull off the last heist Harry had fully mapped out in his notebook. Then, halfway through, the film drops its bomb. Harry, played by Liam Neeson, faked his own death. A flashback shows him rigging that van to explode, killing his own crew so he could disappear with the money. The plan fails because Harry's deception poisons everything it touches, and the women have to finish the job knowing the man who designed it was the real threat the whole time. Widows flips the formula. The plan was perfect, but it was built on a lie, so finishing it means coming face to face with the planner himself. American Animals. 4 college students in American Animals planned the rare book heist of the century, and reality crashed straight into their movie-fed fantasy the second it began. American Animals is the 2018 film written and directed by Bart Layton, and it blends drama with documentary interviews of the real people involved. It is based on a real 2004 heist at Transylvania University in Lexington, Kentucky, where 4 students tried to steal rare books from the Special Collections Library. The main target was a first edition of John James Audubon's The Birds of America, which the crew hoped could sell for as much as $12 million. Here is the irony at the center of it. The students openly modeled their plan on heist movies, even borrowing the color-coded aliases straight out of Reservoir Dogs, which only shows how little they actually understood about real crime. The plan collapsed on contact. They had never seriously planned for the librarian on duty, the sheer weight of the books, or how you actually sell stolen national treasures. All 4 were caught and sentenced to about 7 years and 3 months in federal prison. This is the perfect plan that only ever existed inside the planners' heads. And the movie's whole argument is that watching heist films does not teach you a single thing about pulling one off. Quick Change. This features maybe the smartest bank robbery in movie history, and the genius part works perfectly. It is everything after that goes wrong. Quick Change is the 1990 crime comedy co-directed by Bill Murray and Howard Franklin, starring Murray, Gina Davis, and Randy Quaid. Murray's character robs a New York bank while dressed as a clown, then pulls a genuinely brilliant trick, posing as a freed hostage to stroll the money right out past the police. The plan that fails is the getaway, because the trio simply can't escape New York City. A cascade of blunders, most of them courtesy of the dopey wheelman Loomis, turns what should be a clean exit into an escalating nightmare of cab rides, wrong turns, and rotten luck. Quick Change inverts the entire genre. The hard part goes perfectly, and the easy part, just leaving town, becomes completely impossible. Dead Presidents. The armored truck robbery in Dead Presidents is supposed to be the score that fixes everything, and instead it leaves almost the whole crew dead or in handcuffs. Dead Presidents is the 1995 crime drama directed by the Hughes brothers, partly based on a real veteran's account from the book Bloods. A Vietnam veteran comes home, loses his job, and plans to rob an armored truck carrying old bills the government is retiring from circulation. The crew, made up of fellow veterans, plans the job with real military precision, right down to face paint and a carefully chosen ambush route. And then the plan falls apart violently. The ambush turns into a chaotic, bloody shootout, crew members are killed, and the survivors are hunted down and arrested almost immediately. Dead Presidents ties its failed heist directly to the betrayal these veterans felt waiting for them at home. The Killing. This builds the most precise racetrack robbery ever schemed, and then destroys it with a single suitcase and one gust of wind. The Killing is the 1956 film noir, directed by a young Stanley Kubrick, one of the films that first put him on the map. Ex-convict Johnny Clay assembles a crew to rob the cash room of a racetrack during a featured race, using a tightly timed plan built around a hired sharpshooter and a staged distraction. The robbery is a success, even though a later argument among the conspirators leaves several dead. The plan to actually disappear is what fails. Clay buys an oversized suitcase, stuffs it full of the cash, and checks it as ordinary luggage at the airport rather than carrying it on. Out on the tarmac, the suitcase falls off a baggage cart, bursts open, and the loose bills are blown across the runway by the propeller wash of a taxiing plane. Clay just stands there and watches an entire fortune scatter into the wind. When his partner Faye tells him to run from the approaching police, he simply says, "What's the difference?" and gives up. This is the most memorable image of a perfect plan undone in all of cinema. Everything works except the one thing nobody planned for, the wind. And that single shot of money scattering across a runway is exactly why the film still gets copied 70 years later. If this was worth your time, consider subscribing to keep up with every new upload. Thanks for watching.